15. He didn't like that. His lower lip went in under his teeth, and his eyebrows drew down sharply at the corners. His whole face became sharp and foxy and mean. The buzzer kept up its song. I didn't like it either. If the visitor should happen to be Eddie Mars and his boys, I might get chilled off just for being there. If it was the police, I was caught with nothing to give them but a smile and a promise. And if it was some of Brody's friends, supposing he had any, they might turn out to be tougher than he was. The blonde didn't like it. She stood up in a surge and chipped at the air with one hand. Nerve tension made her face old and ugly. Watching me, Brody jerked a small drawer in the desk and picked a bone-handled automatic out of it. He held it at the blonde. She slid over to him and took it, shaking. "Sit down next to him," Brody snapped. "Hold it on him low down and away from the door. If he gets funny, use your own judgment. We ain't licked yet, baby." "Oh, Joe," the blonde wailed. She came over and sat next to me on the Davenport and pointed the gun at my leg artery. I didn't like the jerky look in her eyes. The door buzzer stopped humming, and a quick, impatient rapping on the wood followed it. Brody put his hand in his pocket on his gun and walked over to the door and opened it with his left hand. Carmen Sternwood pushed him back into the room by putting a little revolver against his lean brown lips. Brody backed away from her with his mouth working and an expression of panic on his face. Carmen shut the door behind her and looked neither at me nor at Agnes. She stalked Brody carefully, her tongue sticking out a little between her teeth. Brody took both hands out of his pocket and gestured placatingly at her. His eyebrows designed themselves into an odd assortment of curves and angles. Agnes turned the gun away from me and swung it at Carmen. I shot my hand out and closed my fingers down hard over her hand and jammed my thumb on the safety catch. It was already on. I kept it on. There was a short, silent tussle, in which neither Brody nor Carmen paid any attention whatever. I had the gun. Agnes breathing deeply and shivering the whole length of her body. Carmen's face had a bony, scraped look, and her breath hissed. Her voice said, without tone, "I want my pictures, Joe." Brody swallowed and tried to grin. "Sure, kid, sure," he said in a small, flat voice that was as much like the voice he had used to me as the scooter is like a 10-ton truck. Carmen said, "You shot Arthur Geiger. I saw you. I want my pictures." Brody turned green. "Hey, wait a minute, Carmen," I yelped. Blonde Agnes came to life with a rush. She ducked her head and sank her teeth in my right hand. I made more noise and shook her off. "Listen, kid," Brody whined. "Listen a minute." The blonde spat at me and threw herself on my leg and tried to bite that. I cracked her on the head with the gun, not very hard, and tried to stand up. She rolled down my legs and wrapped her arms around them. I fell back on the Davenport. The blonde was strong with the madness of love or fear, or a mixture of both. Or maybe she was just strong. Brody grabbed for the little revolver that was so close to his face. He missed. The gun made a sharp rapping noise that was not very loud. The bullet broke glass in a folded back French window. Brody groaned horribly and fell down on the floor and jerked Carmen's feet from under her. She landed in a heap, and the little revolver went skidding off into the corner. Brody jumped up on his knees and reached for his pockets. I hit Agnes on the head with less delicacy than before, kicked her off my feet, and stood up. Brody flicked his eyes at me. I showed him the automatic. He stopped trying to get his hand into his pocket. "Christ," he whined, "don't let her kill me." I began to laugh. I laughed like an idiot, without control. Blonde Agnes was sitting up on the floor with her hands flat on the carpet and her mouth wide open and a wick of metallic blonde hair down over her right eye. Carmen was crawling on her hands and knees, still hissing. The metal of her little revolver glistened against the baseboard over in the corner. She crawled towards it relentlessly. I waved my share of the guns at Brody and said, "Stay put. You're all right." I stepped past the crawling girl and picked the gun up. She looked at me and began to giggle. I put her gun in my pocket and patted her on the back. "Get up, Angel. You look like a Pekingese." I went over to Brody and put the automatic against his midriff and reached his Colt out of his side pocket. I now had all the guns that had been exposed to view. I stuffed them into my pocket and held my hand out to him. Give. He nodded, licking his lips, his eyes still scared. He took a fat envelope out of his breast pocket and gave it to me. There was a developed plate in the envelope and 5 glossy prints. Sure these are all? He nodded again. I put the envelope in my own breast pocket and turned away. Agnes was back on the Davenport, straightening her hair. Her eyes ate Carmen with a green distillation of hate. Carmen was up on her feet too, coming towards me with her hand out, still giggling and hissing. There was a little froth at the corner of her mouth. Her small white teeth glinted close to her lips. Can I have them now? She asked me with a coy smile. I'll take care of them for you. Go on home. Home? I went to the door and looked out. The cool night breeze was blowing peacefully down the hall. No excited neighbors hung out of the doorways. A small gun had gone off on a broken pane of glass. But noises like that don't mean much anymore. I held the door open and jerked my head at Carmen. She came towards me, smiling uncertainly. Go on home and wait for me, I said soothingly. She put her thumb up, then she nodded and slipped past me into the hall. She touched my cheek with her fingers as she went by. You'll take care of Carmen, won't you? She cooed. Check. You're cute. What you see is nothing, I said. I've got a ballet dancer girl tattooed on my right thigh. Her eyes rounded. She said, naughty, and wagged a finger at me. Then she whispered, can I have my gun? Not now. Later, I'll bring it to you. She grabbed me suddenly around the neck and kissed me on the mouth. I like you, she said. Carmen likes you a lot. She ran off down the hall as gay as a thrush, waved at me from the stairs and ran down the stairs out of my sight. I went back into Brody's apartment.